G'day and welcome to the 4-Wheel Drive Supacentre YouTube channel. If you've been searching around YouTube looking for an easy to follow guide on how to install an Anderson plug on your tow bar, then hopefully this is the video for you. In this video, we're going to install an Adventure Kings 50 amp wiring kit to the tow bar of this Navara here. Now, why would you want to install one? Well, you probably know because you're searching, right? You have more than likely got a caravan or a camper trailer that has batteries in it. Those batteries, of course, need charging. You can charge them with solar at camp. But while we're driving to our favorite campsites, well, we want to be charging those batteries too. So that's where this wiring kit comes into play. What it does is it gets power from the starter battery all the way down to the tow bar. I want you to stick with me for this one because this is an incredibly easy install. In fact, there is very little that you need apart from the Adventure Kings 50 amp wiring kit, some cable ties, a drill, or even just a screwdriver if you've got one, some electrical tape and a little bit of split tube, and of course, a pair of side cutters. That's all you need, and a free hour. Now, if you've ever installed an Anderson plug down on your tow bar yourself or paid an auto elect to do it, you'll know one of a couple of things. Well, the first is it's not a cheap exercise. Usually what you've got to do is drop your car off to the auto elect, pay them $300, $400, $500 and get it all done. Or you go down to your local electrical store, you spend $200 or $300 on all the components, including the cabling. You spend a couple of hours fiddling around, trying to make good connections, then you install it yourself. Well, these 50 amp wiring kits are an absolute game changer in my opinion, at least, because, well, number one, they're pre-assembled. They have an inline fuse. They've got ring terminals on one end. They've got an Anderson plug already set up on the other end there. The second thing is they are so affordable. In fact, in a separate video, which I will link in the description, I did a little price comparison between the Kings 50 amp wiring kit, and then I went down to, funnily enough, not one, but two different stores to buy all the components to replicate this kit. And it actually came out to about $240. In fact, the 6 meters of cabling alone, forget all the other accessories, all the bits and pieces, was, I think from memory, about $40 more expensive than the entire Kings kit. So to me, it's just a no-brainer. Now, before we get stuck into it, I want to have a quick chat about the size of the cabling that we're using in this install. And this is, of course, the 50 amp wiring kit, as I was saying. There is as well a 25 amp wiring kit available. And you might say, well, I've got a DC charger in my caravan or my camper trailer, it's only 25 amps. I'd probably just need a 25 amp wiring kit, right? Well, here's the thing. If you were installing a 25 amp DC charger in the back of your car and it was 5 or 6 meters away from the starter battery, and that's only as long as the run of cabling needed to be, then yes, I'd say the 25 amp wiring kit is perfect. But you got to think about it like this. If you have batteries and a DC charger in your van or your camper trailer, then you need to add the distance from them all the way down the chassis to the drawbar of the camper trailer, then that extra 5 or 6 meters up the vehicle to your starter battery, which could be up to 10 meters. So what you need to do when you've got such a long run of cabling is upsize the wiring. So we are going to be in the camper trailer that this ute is primarily going to be towing, putting a 25 amp DC charger in, but I am still using the 50 amp wiring kit because it is double the size. It's 16 mil square, 6 AWG cabling, and that means it will guard against voltage drop. Okay, so before I start to install all the cabling into the vehicle, what I'm going to do is use some split tubing. I'm going to run it down the length of it. It does a couple of things. The first thing that it does is it protects physically the cabling. I'm going to be running this down the firewall and then down along the chassis rail to the back of the vehicle. Now, when you're traveling, you're on gravel roads, you're off-road, stones, sticks, rocks, all those kind of things can flick up. This just adds a little bit more physical protection to the cabling, something for anything sharp to bounce off. And the second thing it does is, well, it gives a nice factory sort of look to the cabling and is nice and neat. So what I'm going to do is just feed it on from this end and just gradually just work it all the way down. And I'm actually going to do this the entire way down this because once we drop down the firewall here, we're going to run, as I said, along the chassis rail to the back of the tow bar. It means that even though we're going to tuck it up as best as we can, and I'll show you how to do that in a moment, it's going to be somewhat exposed the entire way. You might be wondering what size split tubing to buy. Well, this is 19 mil, and as you can see, it's sort of just right on the limits for this twin core 6 AWG of fitting. It does close over nicely. However, it is pretty much a bit of a push. If you hunt around, you can find 22mm split tubing. I'd probably recommend that. I couldn't find any when I was looking for this stuff, so I just went with the 19 and it works, but the 22 is definitely probably the better size for this 6 AWG. So now that we've got the split tubing on the cabling, a good little trick is just to run a bit of electrical tape, couple of wraps around the tubing every, I don't know, 6, 8, 10 inches, whatever, something like that. What that does is it helps the split tubing to stay closed and stay together. But if you ever need to access it, maybe you're doing some fault finding or you're adding some extra cabling to add another electrical circuit, then you don't need to do much more than just get a knife and just slit down these little bits of electrical tape. So I'm just going to go do that, run along the whole length of it, and we'll check back in a second. So, very last wraps of tape, I'm gonna start on the split tube and I'm actually gonna go up onto the cabling itself. All that does is, well, firstly, it secures the split tubing from moving up and down. Second thing it does is it just provides a little bit of a barrier from water and dust and stuff from getting in the end there. It's not gonna be perfect, but it's just a little bit of extra protection. And just the last thing to do before we start putting it in the car is pull the fuse out. We'll put that in right at the end. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do here under the bonnet is actually connect the cabling to the battery itself. We've obviously removed the fuse, so we're safe to do that. Always a good idea at this stage to make sure that your terminals for your battery are in good nick. This car's got less than 20,000 Ks on it, so everything's looking pretty brand new. But if yours has a couple of Ks on it, or if you've done a fair bit of off-road work or been touring around, it's a good opportunity to clean everything up and just make sure you've got a really good connection. So the trick that I like to do here is try and follow the factory wiring as much as I can. So this step here doesn't particularly need to be done, but I'm just going to add a short length of smaller diameter split tube to this end of the fuse holder, just to make the engine bay look nice and neat. And what I'm going to do here is take my time and just have a little bit of a think about where I'm going to run this cabling. I want it out of the way, as I was saying, of heat sources as much as possible and of any moving parts. But I'm also thinking, how do I secure this with a little bit of a cable tie here or there so that it won't move? Because cable ties don't just hold things up out of the way and stop cables from dropping, they stop them from moving while you're traveling, because cables that move while you're traveling are the #1 reason why cables fail, or more precisely, I guess, that connections fail. So everything's connected to the battery. I'm now going to drop the whole length of the cabling down as close to the firewall as possible. I'm looking for a couple of things here. I'm looking for any like little gaps I can sneak it through, and I'm looking at how I can use those cable ties to secure it as nicely as possible. Now I'll show you where I've run the cabling here. I'm going to attach it with some cable ties to this factory wiring just to secure it. The other thing I'm going to do is just make sure the fuse holder is nice and easily accessible. Okay, so we're under the car here, and these little torches, what a ripper, by the way. I'm gonna put it on the work light mode. I can see everything. So, like I was talking about a moment ago, we're just gonna take our time to feed this cabling down to the back of the vehicle. I'm gonna try and keep it as high as possible, nearest to the chassis rail for physical protection, and of course away from things like drive shafts or exhausts. And I'm just gonna take my time and just have a bit of a look. I might not get it right the first time. I'll have a little bit of a play. Cable tie as I go. Once I'm satisfied with each section that it's not going to move and it's in a good position, I'll see you in a moment. Now you'll see what I've done here. I'm cable tying it around this bracket for the fuel rails, but I'm not going around the fuel rails themselves. There's a bit of weight in this 6 AWG cabling, and what I don't want to do is cause any sort of fatigue over time, move those metal fuel rails up and down to the point where they might wear and fail. So around the bracket, excellent. Around the fuel rail, yeah, let's avoid that. So I've got a couple of perfect little holes in the side of the chassis rail here that'd be great to secure this too. But of course I can't get into the chassis rail once I push the cable tie in. So I don't know if you can see that, but I've just bent the end of the cable tie just a little bit. It'll still feed through on itself. I'm now going to feed this end. Now, remember when I was talking a little bit earlier about avoiding things that move when you're running the cable? This is a perfect example. You can see where I've run it here. So I've actually come inboard of the shock and the spring, because they obviously move up and down, and there wasn't enough room to run it on top of the chassis rail, between the chassis rail and the tub. So I've actually had to come a little bit inboard here, but here you can see there's the factory wiring harness right there. That's for the rear tail lights and the tow bar. So perfect place to pick back up again and go through there. So we're all the way down here at the tow bar. Now, I'm gonna connect the housing for the quick connect plug, and pretty simple. All you do is, if you take note, you can see on the end here, this has a little curve right at the end of the pin. And what that does is it actually slides over the top of that little piece of spring steel. So just make sure that the curve is facing downwards. And of course you've got your black on the negative side there, and just push it in until it gives that nice, satisfying little click. And there we go. And of course, the very final thing to do is plug the fuse in. And that's it. And there you go. We've just installed power down to the tow bar to charge the batteries in a camper trailer or a caravan. How easy is that?